So welcome those online who are following us. If you have a book, or I don't know how they'll get a book. If you came, you would get a book. If not, you'll have to listen more closely. Today we're going to turn the page to lesson number 2. Lesson number 1 really was trying to just get us started as to the premise of how you do evidences. This is primarily an evidence type of study. On the 2 premises are the Bible is the Word of God and Jesus is the Son of God. Those are the premises that are trying to be proven through the study. You'll notice we are on lesson 2, which says the historical reliability of the New Testament. Even though that says that, that's not what lesson 2 is about. That's more lesson 3. But it's a 2-part lesson. Today we're looking at, did Jesus actually exist? Was there a Jesus? Let's just get that out of the way. And that's what we're trying to accomplish, at least in today's lesson. What they're going to take us through is various outside sources outside the Bible. Meaning we're not just going to use the Bible, which we are going to use the Bible. But in order to ultimately use the Bible as a proof for Jesus' existence, for his resurrection, for the statements he makes and the truths that we follow, we're also going to have to establish the reliability of the book, the Bible. But today what we're going to do is say, listen, was there a Jesus? You certainly can't be the Son of God if he never even existed. Was Jesus just a mythical person that people made up? Or was he a person that maybe he existed, but people made him more than he ever intended to make himself? Those are good questions, and those are questions you're really going to get and should get by people who have yet to come to believe that Jesus is the Christ, that he was resurrected from the dead. Those are tall orders, but they can be shown to be reliable. And that's where we're going. All right, so if you're on your, let's take the journey together. 5 pagan writers. I am on page 9. Page 8 is just the introductory. Okay, some of it's going to be just historical, but let's get into the idea. Okay. Was there, why, if you're a Christian, I would imagine you have to be a follower of Christ. That's why a Christian. Therefore, he must have existed. I don't know how you came to that conclusion that he actually existed, but you did. You at least trust that 2,000 years ago, there was a teacher, Jewish rabbi, that claimed to be the Son of God and was crucified. Maybe he wasn't, maybe he wasn't, maybe he was. Don't know. This is what we're trying to get to. Do we have outside sources that Jesus actually existed? And remember, we're taking baby steps to build an argument. So you're not going to get there today. Today is just trying to establish him as a person. Did he exist? If he existed, now let's see what was said about him. And ultimately, what did he say about himself? And is it reliable? Okay? That's the journey. All right, a lot of talking from me today. So, I don't know. We got avid readers here. Can someone just read A for us?
I can read it.
Julie's going to do A. Let's start out with the first of 5 pagan Gentile writers.
5 early pagan Gentile writers. Testimony from Thales. In about 52 AD, Thales takes for granted the existence of Jesus when he mentions the darkness which occurred at the Lord's crucifixion. Will Durant says about the middle of the 1st century, the pagan named Thales, in a fragment preserved by Julius Africanus, argued that the abnormal darkness alleged to have accompanied the death of Christ was a purely natural phenomenon and coincidence. Will Durant says the argument took the existence of Christ for granted. Thales never denied that Jesus existed. He took the historical existence of Christ for granted.
All right, so we start with the first guy, right? The first guy. The first guy is Thales. I got to tell you, I had to look some of these up myself. Thales. Thales is a Greek historian. They're saying that in 52 AD, he's a historian. He was writing. What he was writing about was the event of darkness. Anyone remember at the cross, it turned dark for a time? Now that's an event that the lights would just kind of go out for a time. Did that literally happen, or is this a mythological event? Well, what he's stating here is we have found that this Greek historian, Thales, that's who he is, 52, so if Christ was crucified around the 30s, 20 years later, is writing about this event of darkness. Matter of fact, the interesting thing about Thales is he's trying to say it isn't what they're claiming it was, that he was Jesus was being crucified, and therefore God shut the lights out. It was a sign of judgment. He's saying that couldn't be it at all. He believed it was an eclipse of the sun. So that's fine. Whatever he believed it to be, all we know is he's writing about that event. You see where we are. So whether he understands it right or we got it wrong, something happened that time that the skies went dark when they shouldn't have. And he says, oh, it's an event of an eclipse. Africanus, who you see in there, I'm helping you along, Africanus is a Christian writer. But what he's trying to say is, here's what I'm going to tell you. Thales' writings don't exist, meaning we can't find those writings. So how does he know about it? Africanus knows about Thales' writings, meaning they existed. The problem is we don't have those writings today. You can't find them. So let's be fair about our evidences, okay? Let's not say something that we don't have Thales' writings. What we have is Africanus, a Christian writer, who knew Thales' writing. It's just about an author that you may have known about and read. But now the works are gone. But you know that you read them, and you're saying, hey, Africanus is just saying, he's a Christian writer, saying it wasn't an eclipse. It was due to the crucifixion of Christ. You understand what's going on there? So that first evidence is there was a Greek historian that wrote about the darkening of the skies. Any come back for that? Okay.
During Jesus' crucifixion.
Africanus is saying it wasn't an eclipse. It was a God-given event. Thales is saying
Okay.
it was an eclipse.
Okay.
And Africanus is saying it couldn't have been an eclipse. Why? When was Christ crucified? During the
Passover.
And what is normally during the Passover? A full moon.
Full moon.
And he's saying it couldn't have been. What do you got?
And scripture said that it lasted 3 hours.
3 hours.
Do not last 3 hours.
Okay. So there you go. The note says, at least there was a common knowledge in the city of Rome, meaning Africanus is talking about an event. And he's not trying to redo the event. He's saying, you all know about the event. And now you should ask me, when is Africanus writing? Africanus is writing at 200 AD. So it's a little bit of time between him and the event, but to the point where this event is still known 200 years later. Because he doesn't write to have to explain it. He says, you all know about this event, but it wasn't an eclipse.
This is still at a time when oral history is
Very
so
much so.
common. Very few people could write. Very few people who could write wrote it on paper, and that paper typically didn't survive different people in charge. You know, it's like things would be destroyed, or wars, or fires, or whatever happened.
Absolutely.
We don't have a lot of recorded history from immediately from that history. We have recordings of history of what people saw or read before it was destroyed.
Correct. You got to remember the materials that things were written on. Were they not? Animal skins or papyrus, very thin. It wears out. You have to recopy it to keep it going. Fortunately for us, God's hand, we have multiple manuscripts of the Bible and writings of the Bible, which we haven't got to yet. But we're talking, why would Thallus's writings not be around? Well, if they don't get copied and put forward, they just disintegrate and they're gone. So it's only in someone's memory. So it's only to the point where you trust Africanus, who knew Thallus, but he's saying, listen, this isn't something I'm just making up. You all knew about this event. What it was, who knows? We all know it happened. The Bible's telling us why it happened. So he's just saying, at least the crucifixion of this man was a historical event. Whether you believe what happened that day, he was on a cross. What you got?
I was just going to say, it says in here that there was a small fragment preserved by this Julian.
Oh, okay. I am so sorry. You're right. He did.
There.
In a fragment, okay, very good. I am sorry. I didn't even pick up that point. You're right. He quoted it. All right, very good. All right. All right, let's keep going. Oh, what do you?
We don't have our scriptures today except by virtue of thousands of priests in Ireland devoting their life to copying it.
Because they saw it as a holy script.
Correct.
And worth copying. Matter of fact, the Jews would destroy the scrolls as they got old because they are honoring it.
Right.
And if it becomes, they would have to destroy it. They didn't want it to just disintegrate. So we're going to get there. How did we get our Bible? Is it trustworthy? Okay. We're going to move on, but I love your comments. Mara Bar Sarpion. I think when I heard it was Serpion. A manuscript in the British Museum, which preserves the text of a letter that was written sometime after 70 AD, right? 73. This is Mara Bar Sarpion, was a Syrian, and he was sending a letter to his son in prison at the time of the writing. The father pleads for his son to be wise by illustrating the folly of persecuting such wise men as Socrates, Pythagoras, and Christ. These are historical figures. Did they exist? You tell me. Do we have some of their writings? Yes. No. You have more historical writings concerning Christ than you do the other two gentlemen that were just mentioned. And yet we don't question Socrates, but we question whether Christ. You understand what I'm saying? This is the argument you want to make as people question the historicity of Christ. And again, we haven't even got to the Bible. We're just saying, did he exist? You give me a lot of yeses, so I know there's something underneath that. You're doing okay. All right, good. So we have a letter saying, listen, let me read it. What advantage did the Athenians gain by putting Socrates to death? What advantage did the men of Samos gain from burning Pythagoras? What advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king? Doesn't say Jesus, doesn't say Christ. Says wise king. But Socrates did not die for good. He lived on in the teachings of Plato. Pythagoras did not die for good. He lived on the statue of Hera. Nor did the wise king, speaking of Christ, die for good. How does he live on? He lives on in the teaching which he gave. See it? Okay. So, again, the only point that we're making today, Christ is being mentioned as a real historical figure. He includes the crucifixion, which is another plus. He includes just that he had followers and he had teachings. Good? Okay. The point is, I'll read at the bottom, the point is that sometimes after 73 AD, by the time of Sarpion was writing to his son, Jesus had already gained fame and equal stature with men just like Socrates and Pythagoras, showing that Jesus was a real person of history. Okay? Good. Now we turn to a Roman historian, Tacitus. I'm going to save my voice. Go ahead. Wait.
Testimony from Cornelius Tacitus. Usually rated as the greatest historian of Rome, Tacitus, born 52 to 54 AD, at about the age of 60, were made scapegoats for the great fire of 64 AD. It had been rumored that Nero himself started the fire in order to gain glory by rebuilding the city, Tacitus says.
Okay, now look what does he say. Consequently, here it goes, to get rid of that report that Nero started the fire, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abomination. Isn't that interesting that Christians were said that they were doing abominations? You'll probably understand why. They were called Christians by the populace because they were followers of this Christ, the anointed one. Christus. He uses the word Christus and doesn't say Christ, from whom the name had its origin. This Christ suffered the extreme penalty, I wonder what that was, during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our Roman procurators, Pontius Pilate. Note, to the pagan Tacitus, the name Christus was more than likely a proper name, so Tacitus was in a good position to learn of Christianity in that he was the governor of Asia at 112 AD. What do you have to say about those statements?
Well, the statement that I wanted to make is if he's referring to him as Christus, okay, then throughout the history of this event, he was designated the Messiah.
The anointed one,
That's
Messiah.
what he was, that became his name. Now for us, we just use it as Jesus Christ like his last name.
Correct.
But to say he's the Messiah when he was the King of the Jews is of great significance and probably what really pissed off the Jews. But he was known as the Messiah.
What? Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think the abomination? What were the Christians doing that they would point at and say, they meet together and there's an abomination among these people?
Bread and blood.
It really is the Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
When you take the body and blood of Christ, they're saying, these people drink blood and eat flesh. They're seen as these abominations that they practice. Isn't that interesting that the Christians are seen that way? But it shows you they practice that regularly enough to be known for it, yes? Okay. Testimony of Pliny the Younger.